can raise the voice. It's up to the other Ugandans also to raise their voices. And to me, this is not even an issue about General Muhoozi as an individual. It's an issue about the institution. There is a parliament. There are organs of the ruling party. And the more we keep raising this issue, the more hopefully people can see the serious nature of that. Because even as we talk about, you keep hearing people talking about transition. And many people are so limited to the aspect of one human being replacing another. That's nothing. That's not the transition we're talking about. We're talking about transitioning from the culture that we've had 60 years. So if we are to even have one individual replacing another, it doesn't matter to me who, but the culture remains. That wouldn't be transition. It would be having a replacement of one individual, replacing another. But if you continue moving the same direction, then the country will remain as we are, in a state of hopelessness, basically. And to me, that's why I keep on raising the voice in regard to General Muhoozi, getting out of uniform. And it is not just up to him, because that's another error I think people make, for the whole matter to be put on his shoulders now, because it should not be left to an officer to be the one to decide when and when not to, or if or not to, to leave the uniform or not to leave the uniform, and even when to do so. This must be a question of the law. The moment you determine to engage in politics, the law should apply there and then. So we'll keep on talking. Hopefully, we'll also maybe apply different measures in the sense of raising the awareness and the consciousness of the population about the issue we are talking about. Because it's a critical issue as far as I'm concerned. It's an issue about the law, but more so it's an issue about culture. Because we have had a culture of impunity growing for 60 years, and it has reached frightening levels. Now, you look at the perspective from the security angle as well. I mean, you have an army, and you have a general who is out there campaigning, and you have an army of officers and men who know that they cannot run. So what kind of country do you have in that regard, where you find that, one, there is impunity, two, there is selective application of the law? These are fundamental questions. There are questions of how do we transit from where we have been, in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, to create a new future. To me, that's the question, and we just keep on raising it, and one hopes that at some point there's going to be a turning point, whatever that time is going to be. But on the other side, it is also as well, as strange as it may sound, it's also as well that this is happening. Because General Muhoozi, I have no problem him running as a president, but I would have hoped that he would have the understanding, unless he wants to use force. But when you don't want to use force, if you want to build trust with the population, if you want to convince people that you are capable, then you must act in such a way that, one, if you are talking about, for example, the fight against corruption, for example, about justice, for example, about fairness, for example, about transparency in the management of the national or the state apparatuses, that you'd have to show that actually you are equal to what you are talking about. But when you are out there, like now in this regard, and the question keeps coming up, and the question keeps coming up, and you continue campaigning as if the law doesn't matter, then the intelligent Ugandans, whether they are many or few, but at least there must be intelligent Ugandans who would start asking themselves questions. But look, if there is someone in uniform and he contravenes the law and he doesn't care, what would it tell you about the mentality of that person? That you are not yet a president of a country, but you are contravening the law, but it doesn't matter to you. So what happens when you are a president of a country? I mean, these are issues we'll have to keep raising. It is up to the Ugandans themselves which direction they want to take. basically, we do what we have to do. The citizens will also have to do whatever they want to do. And, logically, to me, everybody would be asking themselves that kind of question. Because most other times, when leaders project themselves to be whatever they want to be, whatever level they want to lead at, my expectation always would be that the citizens would now start gauging the nature of the politicians who have run for whatever office and find out, is this person capable? Now, for other areas, of course, like C5, like MPs, yes, most times people go through the sieve. Many of our people in Uganda are not conscious enough to try and find out the character and nature of these leaders, because they are not so critical. Yes, they can make bad decisions, there's no doubt about that. But the person who's going to lead a country of 45 million people, I would have hoped, and basically I would expect that, for example, the educated class would be trying to find out, these people who want to lead this country, what kind of people are they? Now, in regard to General Muhoozi, one, him not recognizing that he needs to get out of uniform, that's one aspect. And of course, basically. So, I mean, if you have never met a person to have a conversation, you cannot gauge them. You cannot gauge them in the manner in which they act. And to me, this is a very big pointer. That basically General Muhoozi doesn't care about the law. And other Ugandans can make their own assessments and make whatever choices they want to make. There must be different criteria on the basis of which people make decisions. But as for me, it's been long enough time to understand that he just doesn't care about the law. So if I was, unless of course he wants to use force to take power, if he doesn't care about the opinion of the Ugandan people. But on the other side, if the Ugandan people also care about the culture we intend to build, most of them seem to be mute. You don't hear this being raised in the leaders of the cultural institutions. You don't hear this being raised in the areas of the religious leaders. You don't hear it from prominent people. You don't hear it from people who, I have seen those who have tried to raise it actually even in the movement, some openly, many quietly. Well, and basically I normally see the responses to them. So what future are we shaping? If people cannot just raise a question, which doesn't require a debate, it's a question of the law, but it's a struggle. It's never easy. And there are those who will keep on doing what they have to do. The others who try to bury their heads in the sand. But you bury your heads in the sand and you can easily pay a big price somewhere down the road,
on the trust in the citizenry that probably one day they may realize the wrong they're doing, and they may change their ways. Now I hand you over to Remmy.
Absolutely, Mordecai.
Yes.
Look, it's only logical. I mean, I see people like now running after the ministers and all those people who store handsheets. Why? Because they broke the law. So anybody who breaks the law needs to be handled similarly. If we want to build a country where everybody is secure in the knowledge that they are equal before them, that they are protected by the law, that anybody who contravenes the law cannot operate above it. We have to build that culture, And I mean, every situation creates an opportunity. This is an opportunity where Ugandans need to just come out and say, don't care who runs for president, who will be able to vote, whoever becomes the president, but every president must operate within the law. That's basically what we're trying to say. To me, it's not about General Muhoozi. Even if it was anybody else, they would be raising the same question. This is not about individuals. We are talking about building a new culture. We've seen many leaders since 1962, doing all nature of things because of the compliance of the population most time. That compliance has cost us a lot. And now we're at another, we're almost moving towards another point. Inevitably, there will be a turning point. And people are not addressing this question. You can't understand the nature of most of the educated people. Because I would believe that anybody who's ever in school is capable of analysis. Even when you support, even those who support the Mordecai, I believe are the one who would be said, yes, we support him, but get out of the uniform. It's a national uniform. You must operate within the law. Because even when in the event that you need the country, would need a president that follows the law. Why would something like that not be so obvious? It's the most logical.
Same question. It's not rocket science to understand. But now I'll hand you over to Remmy Bahati. He's got some interesting questions there. I'll get back to you later.
Thank you so much, Mordecai and General Muntu. And General Muntu, thank you so much for your thoughts about General Muhoozi and him getting out of the uniform. The last time I tried to engage him in a constructive debate and critiquing and holding him accountable for his reckless tweets, he went on the defensive side, calling me ugly, which doesn't define me. I mean, you and I have taken in the brunt of his disrespect, so I don't want to engage further on him. General Muntu, under this new topic that I'm going to be talking about, your responses to these questions will significantly influence the decisions and actions of Ugandans who value inclusivity, diversity, and respect for all members of our society. The first question I have for you, and this can be a brief response, do you still believe in and uphold the principles of freedom, justice, and equality of all Ugandans?
Yes, I mean, those are things that all of us talk about. The only discomfort I have. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Hello? Hello? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
General, I can hear you.
Me?
I don't know what happened. I think we got disconnected from Twitter.
Yeah, me too.
You can hear me, right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Great.
We got disconnected on Twitter. Maybe we should, I don't know, are they going to host another space or we should proceed on Zoom? Either way.
Oh, we got disconnected on Twitter?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, what happened?
I don't know. I think the host, the person using the ant was having issues to do with the internet. I received a notification.
So basically, it means now we are on Zoom. And,
yeah, we are on the internet. I received the notification.
Okay. So the question now was the issues of justice.
Yeah,
and transparency, and basically good governance principles on the basis of which a country can be run and every citizen feels secure in whatever endeavor they are engaged in. Is that the question?
Yeah, so my question was, do you still believe in and uphold the principles of freedom, justice, and equality for all Ugandans?
Absolutely. My biggest concern, though, is having participated in the political activities of our country from the young age up to now, my biggest fear is not so much what we say we stand for. My biggest fear is that we seem not even have a critical number of people who have gone through our educational institutions who are able to stand by what they talk about. Because we talk about, for example, democracy. How do you build democracy without democrats? We talk about transparency in the manner of managing national resources. How will you run a transparent system where there is accountability when you don't have people who are transparent? We talk about these things. And there is no measure yet, at least there is no machine through which people can walk and it is able to show a green light for those who have consistency in thinking and in actions, and show red for those who have got contradictions between theory and practice. We don't have that. So you can only see them in practice. So even now, as we head towards a transition, which is inevitable, as we have seen many changes in government for 60 years, we go by what we all say. But
that's
in practice,
impressive.
now, in practice for 60 years, it has clearly shown that we have not had a period in the last 60 years when we have ever had a critical number of political actors who have the consistency between their belief systems and their actions. And to me, that is the biggest challenge. That's why, to me, and that's why for us in NT, we concentrate a lot in preparing a critical number of people who will change the nature of politics in this country. That's why we keep talking about a new culture, a new culture. We're not talking about a new human being who will be at the top. You have a new human being at the top. If you cannot build a new culture, it doesn't matter. I mean, we've been there before. Most of you are young. So you only read about the past. You only read about the 60s. I was young in the 60s, but I was at the same time old enough to see what was happening. And my father being an active politician, I would mostly keep track of what was happening in the late 60s. By the time of the coup, I was in P7. I was old enough to know what was happening. In the 70s, I was here in Uganda. I had an opportunity to go out and study in, there were two universities in which I was going to have options of going to. Fortunately, I just decided to remain here in Makerere. And therefore, I was able to notice what was happening in the 70s, 80s, same thing, 90s, up to now. So the more we keep talking about these values, I mean, as I think it's the Americans, I suppose, who say talk is cheap. Anybody of us can say anything. Again, the English saying which says the taste of the pudding is in the eat. So the earlier we have groups and those who are involved in politics, my hope is that who wants to see change, qualitative change in this country, have to concentrate on that. The people are consistent in not only what they say, but consistent in how they act. So there is going to be a time when a group like that is able to take power and can change this country and put it on the right track. So right now, as we speak, anybody can say anything. I mean, who can't say, where have you ever had a politician who's going to go and say, I am going to be corrupt, or I am going to run a country based on nepotism, or I will be segregative, or whatever negative thing? Whoever says that, everybody will market themselves. Even political organizations will market themselves. The question is, on the balance of forces internally within an organization, where does the balance of forces fall? In favor of which tendency? So there is no party which is going to find that is 100%, agreed in the direction of how things should move. You always find their tendencies. The question right now, which is so critical for this country, whichever party takes power, which is going to be the dominant tendency? If the party which takes power has got the dominant tendency of people who believe in the values that we talk about, they believe about equality before the law, they believe in justice, they believe in fairness, they believe in equal opportunities, then we would know that we have got a future now which can be predicted. Before that happens, forget about predictability.
Right, General, I'm just going to cut it short right there so we can go back to the Twitter space. There are quite a lot of people who are waiting to hear from you. So if you can, please log in.
It's been reconnected?
Yeah, we've been reconnected, so it would be nice to go back. there.
Okay.
Mordecai, you as well. You can switch. Great. Guys, thanks all for coming back. We had, of course, in a country where social media is restricted, you can't expect to have a smooth conversation without any interruption. So we were on here a few minutes ago and we got disconnected because of the internet, but we're happy to be back, and soon General Muntu will be joining, reconnecting, and then we'll continue the conversation. We're all excited, me and Mordecai, my co-host, we're all excited to hear from him. As always, to hear his thoughts on good governance, militarism, human rights, foreign policy. And this is the conversation we've been having. And before we got disconnected, oh, I saw him went off. Before we got disconnected, I was engaging General Mugisha Muntu about issues to do with justice and equality and inclusivity for everyone, and also issues he was responding to that question. So I'll wait for him to come back so we can continue. Let's just give it a few minutes. And in the meantime, please feel free to share. Okay, he's back. Can someone please let him in, Mordecai, Alliance?
Oh, just a second.
In the meantime, feel free to share this space. We had a great audience before we got disconnected. Okay, let me let in General. So he's back. We'll come back to now.
I sent a request. Can you hear me?
What is going on? What is happening? I hope he's not being targeted. Anyway, I was saying, feel free to share this space, invite friends, contribute. You can tweet at me your questions if you have any. As you can see, time is going by. We lost. I was going to say we lost.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We lost some time. So I may not give everyone a chance to ask a question, but I'm happy to take it and to ask General Muntu. Mordecai, Muriisa, you are there in the meantime. You have anything to share in regards to what General Muntu had shared earlier on with you? Okay, go
on. Thank you so much. And again, I want to extend my appreciation to everyone that is here. We had some technical glitch and we went off, and we are just back. And I'm quite certain that, there's some new people that are joining us right now. We are trying to make sure that we have General Muntu join us so that we can go on with our conversation. But some of the most important things that the General has again reiterated when I asked him about the ways of Muhoozi Kainerugaba, I was extremely pleased when he mentioned that, it is not about Muhoozi. The question must be about the culture, the breaking of the law. It is not about the individual. And he again emphasized so many Ugandans to continue raising our voice, knowing that, someday our hope is built in the faith, we have in so many Ugandans, knowing that someday someone will realize how wrong it is. Everything that is done that shouldn't be done, so we continue singing the same song over and over again, because one thing I know for sure, I was impressed when I found out at one time how you establish a lie and people come to believe a lie. You keep on repeating the same thing over and over again, and somehow, somewhere, eventually people start believing that lie. So it is the same thing when it comes to truth. Now, what you are raising is just nothing but plain truth, that, this is against the law. So if we continue doing this over and over again, if those ones that do lie actually end up winning, how about us that are going to be stating facts? So let's continue raising our voices on the wrong thing that is, because this is extremely against the culture of an institution in the army, and it doesn't end with Mr. Museveni and his compatriots. So let's continue raising voices. I don't know whether the General is here. I think he's still facing some technical glitches, but please stay with us. The conversation was just getting started, and we are having a very interesting time. So you don't want to miss out on this. And please do share this link with all your friends and probably family, and we can have we can have a good time understanding how we have to handle the turmoil that we are grappling with as a nation. Remmy.
General Muntu mentioned something that was really kind of interesting for me. He's trying to get in. He said,
can you hear me?
As always said, he cannot speak about Muhoozi's leadership capabilities if he doesn't get out of the uniform, which is really like ideal. I wouldn't want to speak about him, whether he's able to lead the country, whether he has a brain to do that. But why has the military remained silent? I remember when General Sejusa came out, was it in 2016, to campaign for Dr. Kizza Besigye? He was court-martialed.
Mm-hmm.
There are several other people who have been taken to the court-martial for their support for engaging in partisan politics. Today we have the whole court-martial and several UPDF officers campaigning and engaging in politics. Why are they silent? These are the questions we need to be asking. Instead of asking, is Muhoozi capable to lead? We shouldn't even be pushing this narrative when there are laws of the land that are being broken.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I was happy with the submission of General Muntu Mordecai, and I was sorry guys, I wanted to take him on about that, but then I realized I don't know whether it's even what, because there is nothing that is going to change. What we should be looking at is what's the way forward. How are we going to ensure there is respect for the rule of law, respect for human rights, so that everybody is treated equally under the law? That is something that I care deeply about, and I'm so passionate about that. And anyone who is an abuser, I mean, I don't go along with them quite well. So Mordecai, is there any other thing that you wanted to talk about from his initial submission? And guys, just to give you a heads up, we're looking at so many topics. We started with the rule of law and constitutionalism, how things are changing. We're going to be looking at foreign policy. We're going to look at the opposition unity. We're going to be looking at building structures for the next elections, and so much more. And then we'll have a Q&A from the audience. Mordecai?
Yeah, I think from his perspective, I was so glad that he mentioned the impunity that is being done, in our eyes, the selective application of the law. And this really informs me or reveals the highest levels of nepotism that because if, like you said, General Tinyefuza was court-martialed over the same thing that Muhoozi is doing, but now because he's a daddy's boy, nothing is going to be done to him. And this is the question. This is the conversation. These are things that we must continue raising every now and then, because if we ignore them, then we legitimize the unguided dreams of Muhoozi Kainerugaba to superintend over 40 million Ugandans. So the question must be,
Can you hear me now?
I think we can hear you, and you're joining us. The question, Jeno, is saying that, before we even get to the question of, yes, we can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Two things. I was picking you, the conversation you are having. I wasn't, I don't know what's happening this side. The system keeps getting off. But two things. One, in regard to what Mordecai was just talking about, the issue of the law. When General Tinyefuza, before he was released from the army, and actually he wrote and wanted to meet opposition parties. I recall very, very vividly, because I was the party leader of FDC. And I specifically said, I completely understand the situation in which our colleague General Tinyefuza finds himself in. They are trampling on his rights. They are walking all over him. But at the same time, at that time, we had gone multi-party system of governance. And I, as a party leader, advised, but also basically took a decision, because there are those who thought that that was not the right thing to do at that time. We were looking more at the situation in which General Tunyefuza was, his rights being trampled on. But to me, I was looking at the question also of him still being in uniform, much as he desired to be out of uniform, but he had not been released. And I said, therefore, we are not going to receive him. And I got a lot of flack. But I am particular about certain things when I'm doing certain things. So to me, you know, there are things you don't compromise on. And if we want to have the rule of law, we have to build a culture for it. Is it straightforward? No, it's not straightforward. It's a path that is rocky. There are so many things you'll meet on the way. But there are decisions you must keep making. So on an issue like this, I am not just targeting just one individual. You know, I'm just looking at how do you, I mean, like if I was, for example, if I was in the army and you are in uniform and you want to go and run for a position and you know you cannot, but someone else is, how would that make one feel? I clearly know that many of the officers and men in the uniform, and that's how we are trained. Basically, when you're in uniform, you have to be very, very mature in the manner in which you act when you are in uniform. What you say, where you say it, because the army is the foundation of the stability of a country. So building a culture of that nature is, to me, critical. And now we have a bit of a problem because you have got the state which is supposed to protect people's freedoms and rights, trampling on those rights. But at the same time, you have got to observe a number of things that you know can contribute to the long-term stability of the country. It's a very complex issue. So we'll keep raising it. And then I had Bahati was talking about, Remmy was talking about a question of, I think she made a comment and said she doesn't believe that anything is going to happen. I never think like that in my life. In my life, however difficult any situation is, I never allow myself or my mind to fall in the which is normally tempting. I mean, we are human beings, and there are times when you see the reality of the situation and you see very, very tough things all around, the circumstances being quite complex. However, I have always known that however dark any situation may seem, the one thing you must never allow yourself to fall into is to believe that that's a permanent situation. You have to keep working on changing that reality, which is undesirable, that you are engaged in or caught up in, to change it to a new reality that you desire to see happen. And that's how I operate. I know that those who I know, come again? Remmy, this is something beyond General Muhoozi as far as I'm concerned. One, we should not let General Muhoozi to be the one to decide when or how to get out of the army. It should be the system. I mean, I can't even understand why those who are in the system do not understand what they are trying to do. Because to leave it to an individual who is breaking the law to be the one to determine when, how, is simply stupid. This is a country of 45 million people. In another 25 years, I see many young people below 30 who don't recognize that by the time they hit 40, 50 years, we are going to be 100 million people. So if you don't build a culture that will create a firm foundation on the basis of which you can have people living in freedoms and rights and amidst a state of sanity. What happens when you have 100 million people in a country of lawlessness? I simply can't understand how people can't project and look ahead, and building cultures doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. So people have to focus on that. Get the eyes off General Muhoozi and work on the parliamentarians, work on the people who can take platforms and speak. This has nothing to do with General Muhoozi. This has to do with the nature of the country we want to shape, the direction we want to take. It's not General Muhoozi who is the only person in this country. We have 45 million people. So it should not just be left to General Muhoozi. I mean, that is elevating him above what he is. He's a general in the army. There are many generals in the army. Many have retired. We're talking about the future. We're not talking about an individual. We're talking about a country, for God's sake. Why can't people even understand something that simple, that basic? This is not about General Muhoozi. Even if it had been another general, would be talking about the principle. That's what needs to be so spoken about over and over, that it sinks even in the minds of people who possibly have given up. How can people give up about the future of a country that is growing in terms of population? And in all other areas, there is uncertainty as whether systems will be operating, whether institutions will be strengthened. That's the whole point. Yeah. Remmy, I can tell you that when you have a country of 45 million people, there's absolutely no way you cannot have a significant number of them who want to see a better future. Because the more the numbers we engage, the better. I mean, look, we are not using weapons. There's no warfare here yet. I hope we don't ever get into that. Look at the fight which has been going on for 1 year in between Russia and Ukraine. One would have hoped that Russia being a superpower, that the Ukrainians would just simply roll over and let the Russians go and take Kiev and do whatever they wanted to do. Whatever side you support, whether anybody supports Ukraine or whether one supports Russia, to me that is not the issue. The issue is that you have a people who have a stake. In terms of numbers, they are inferior in numbers, in terms of population. In terms of the military capabilities, definitely they want equal to the Russian military capabilities. But they have put up a fight. Whatever happens, whether eventually they end up being defeated or not, but they have put up a fight. So they can only be vanquished, but you can't say they surrendered. Now, Ugandans have to know that. There's nothing that ever comes easy. We need to know that. So the question is, which direction do people want to go? The easiest direction is to surrender, and whoever wants to do anything to them, do it. That's one direction. The other direction is to say, no, we don't have any problem, anybody can lead, but they must follow the law. And then stand up and fight for that. I'm not saying that there won't be casualties along the way. I've never had any war which has been won, whether military, whether political, because even when it comes to these autocratic regimes, there are costs. So the question is, if people are not able to pay the costs now, down the road there will be costs. eventually things always degenerate to a point when a price has to be paid. Always. You can avoid paying a cost temporarily, but eventually when things keep deteriorating, there is a moment when inevitably people pay a cost and the country pays the cost. Yes. That one I cannot give you my own personal view. Yeah, I'll give you my own personal views. So, because normally when I'm on this platform, many times I speak my personal, well, most times I project the views of the party, which I am part of NT. So I only have to clearly indicate whoever is listening, the views I'm going to give are views of an individual. And I'll give them, let me give you my views as an individual. Let me give you my views as an individual. First, I give it context. Homosexuality is as old as history, right from biblical times. You've always had the question of homosexuality. Even in Uganda, homosexuality has always been there. I don't think there's any ethnic group or language where you don't find that local word. They have always been there. What causes the complexity and the quarrels that are going on the global scale are the dynamics which are happening in the two spheres of the world. One, the developing countries like Uganda and many parts of Africa, and Europe. Context is very, very important. As we speak in Europe, which about 30, 40 years ago, homosexuality was never in the open as it is now. Hello? 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 Can you hear me? Hello? Hello? Hello?
Yes, I think we can all hear you.
Hello? Can you hear me? Hello?
General, we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Apparently, Twitter was updating.
General, you have the microphone.
You can now hear me? So I was saying that until about possibly the 70s in the United States of America and Europe, that's when on Twitter, hello? Can you hear me now? You can now hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. So in the last 30 years or so, that's when homosexuality started becoming a critical factor, for example, in the American politics. I remember even some of the institutions, for example, like in the American Army, until about 2000 plus, they had a policy of don't ask, don't tell. So homosexuality coming at the center stage of the politics of America is recent, you know. So in Africa, where we are at now, like here in Uganda, you need to recognize that there is a confluence between two forces, the force of tradition and the religious groups. And all the large religious groups, be it the Protestant Church or Church of Uganda, be it the Catholic Church, be it the Islamic denominations, be it the Pentecostals, on the question of homosexuality, all of them have got the same stance. So in a country like Uganda, and I see it happening in many parts of Africa, there is a common position, which is quite rare, between the forces of tradition and the forces of religion on the issue of homosexuality, more so in regard, for example, on marriages. They don't accept that. Two, the other complexity that I notice now, because much as there has been homosexuality in Uganda and many African countries, people never targeted homosexuals. Until now that it is becoming a political issue. However, what is a bit interesting that needs us to carefully find out is why something which, at least at this point in time, would not necessarily be considered to be one of the critical issues at the center of our politics, but which is at the center of politics in Europe, in America, that any group would want to spend the amounts of money which seem to be being spent to promote it in a place like Uganda or other African countries. So the intensity of the problem that we notice is because of that kind of situation that has arisen. So what is the personal view? One, I wouldn't agree to anybody, for example, legalizing homosexual marriages. Two, I would propose that we affirm when it comes to the propagation of homosexuality in the young people, which is also another issue that is raising temperatures in the primary educational systems, in the secondary schools. So the question one would have to ask oneself is, why on earth would one spend so much money to influence an issue at that level? When it comes to individuals who, by either nature or nurture, find themselves to be homosexuals, I don't think they should be targeted, nor should the law target them. Like I think there was a time when they were saying they should not be rented premises, blah, 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 blah. So there needs to be careful legislation to ensure that they are not victimized, but the areas where there is literally consensus in the majority of the people, and in this case where you find tradition meeting with religious groups, like on homosexual marriages, I don't think it would be correct for us at this point in time to legalize it. But I also don't think that it is correct that there should be impunity in regard to someone, for example, targeting a homosexual because he is a gay or lesbian and they are known to be that, and they are specifically targeted for harassment. They need to have their own individual rights. But when it comes to organized forces to influence society, to necessarily take the direction of how the influence is going in the schools, that needs to be stamped out. So I think we need to engage in these debates and see how to craft a law that would ensure that we are protected as a people in our traditions, in our current religious beliefs, but without necessarily targeting anybody who's known to be gay or lesbian, to say that you don't employ them, to say that you don't rent houses to them, as it seemed was in the laws which were passed the other year, I think 2, 3, 4 years ago. It's a complex issue, it's emotive, but I think those who have reached a point where they accept homosexuality that the West and America and Europe also need to respect the countries which are at the level at which they are, because America and Europe, at some point, even in democracy, even in terms of democracy itself, democracy as it is exercised 50 years ago, there are people who couldn't vote, who had no right to vote in America. So it was also a gradual process as the debate, unfolds in different times. I think Europe and America are bringing an issue that is quite disruptive in our environment. And we'll wait and see how different countries handle it and how different organizations handle it. Which one? Unfortunately, I don't have the details of it. To be honest with you, I don't have everybody knows about it. To be honest with you, it's not what everybody follows that I do follow. We are here, Remmy, let me tell you, my own thinking. There are many issues which to me mean our, what do they call it? If there are things which are so central to what we are trying to do as a country, now, if we don't concentrate on them and resolve them, I can tell you the homosexual issues, yes, they're important. They're individuals who should not be, who can engage in that. But there is an existential threat in a number of other areas. So don't think that where everybody pays attention that I necessarily follow whatever everybody else follows. There are things I keep focused on because I know what it means. That I don't know whether you understand that we are teetering on the edge, that this country can go through another crisis. It is controversial. I keep hearing people bashing each other on it, but in my own mind, I'm asking. I come from a place called Chitunga, Rwashamere. Anybody who is on this group comes from a village somewhere. I highly doubt that people on the fireplace in those areas, when they're on the fireplace, or amongst the issues that are of an existential threat to them, that in the first 5 or 6 or 7 that you'd find them discussing homosexuality. People are dying like drugs. They just can't get justice in courts. There are so many problems in this country. So even when it comes to, there are issues which are controversial for people. There are issues also which I think need to be focused on. Primary issues need to remain primary issues. Unfortunately, in Uganda, we bring peripheral issues, they become centralized. And we peripheralize central issues. Does that mean that we shouldn't discuss those issues? We should. But there's a lot more attention, because if you are in chaos and the country, people are dying, who's going to think about it? And as that some of the issues are emotive, I fully understand that. And really, it's not that I'm dismissing the issue, no. But I keep focusing on a number of things which I think that the moment we really don't keep working on those day and night, that we are literally sleepwalking ourselves into what could become an open crisis. We think when there was warfare, we were fighting 7 wars in this country. You really think they were caring about who sleeps with who at that time? People just simply wanted to survive. And after survival, they were looking at how they can get, a better life. Then one can now, once you've gone through that process, as you build a foundation, the best of which people can access, what enable them to live, a decent life. Then those questions inevitably come. There are other questions which now that could be secondary. Down the road, who knows how many years? Maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, maybe 15, maybe 20 years. We now move from being secondary to being primary. And the problem is when you make secondary issues primary and primary issues become peripheral. That's the way I operate anyway. And they evolve, but they also evolve. Remmy, you need to know that. They are human race as they are written. Yes, and we are supportive of that. But they evolve. I mean, Remmy, you are a lady. You are in America now. It is not like after Americans became independent that women started fighting. They fought tough battles. In some instances, even in advanced countries, women are still fighting for equal pay, for equal work. It's a human right, but there's still a battle going on. I don't know whether you understand where I'm coming from. Yeah. No, it's not. It is not a reservation. It's a conviction. And I'm also a realist, I understand. And two, you need to know that I also have personal convictions. One, and it's such an emotional issue when people talk about homosexuality that propaganda and the whole nature of blackmail and all that rise, but I never care about that personally. Because you have to, no, I really don't care about people. Nobody can even blackmail me, nobody. I stand by my convictions. For example, you have to differentiate. If I may delve a little bit further on the question of homosexuality and all that. One, I am a Christian believer. One, when I'm looking at homosexuality, I see it as an unnatural act. But at the same time, there are people who are that. So even for Christian believers, the Jesus whom I believe in hated sin, but he never hated sinners. So you have to be very, very careful, even when you disagree with what people are engaged in. Because there are many things beyond homosexuality, which ordinarily, like people who believe, see as sin. But you have to be very careful not to wrap up sin and the sinner. There has to be a differentiation. And it is clear, the teaching is very clear. Jesus hates sin, he loves sinners. So you have to ensure that when it comes to like my own view, I don't think that homosexuality, as is said by a number of people, that it is natural. I don't think. I may be right, I may be wrong, but that's my personal viewpoint. But even if it is unnatural, does it mean you should victimize that person? You shouldn't. But should it be actively promoted? I don't think it should. I would be against any action that would want to promote that. So how to build that into law, you have to be very careful. And my hope is that people would put aside emotions and look on how to deal with that question, emotive as it is, at where we are at now. Those are my views, Remmy. They are not hidden views. They may be right, they may be wrong, but that's what I believe. And it can easily divert us from some of the things which are of an existential threat to us if we spend too much time in those questions.
some of the things that I would witness, but I saw dead bodies on streets and government, coming out defending outright breaking of the law. While I'm saying all that, I've seen, I mean, a few days ago, I've just hinted on what happened to my friends and former colleagues, Chitimbo Thomas and Isano Francis. I mean, there was pepper sprayed by the rogue security officer. I had a conversation a few days ago with my friend John Cliff Wamala, who used to work at NTV. I mean, he's faced some of the wrath of those guys. And I remember at one time I was having an interview with Stella Nyanzi, and I can't believe we were in Kamwocha, and I was interviewing her, and she had sirens going off. And in the middle of the interview, this woman fainted. We couldn't go on with the interview. I mean, all of these things, we've seen things that are complete abysmal. They've created a feeling of PTSD and obnoxious feeling that even thinking about going through the same process or even raising a voice, it creates some sort of fear. Fear has been instilled right at the bottom of the hearts of so many Ugandans. Innocent Ugandans remain incarcerated, many allegedly already dead. I mean, I understand. I read Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death. In a situation where we see all this, I mean, you said we shouldn't lose hope. Let's not get into a situation where we're going to say that, all this, I think the Englishman says that it's always darkest before dawn. But how do we convince these Ugandans that, it is darkness, but if you give it a little time, be a little patient, so, the sun is going to come out. With all these things that have been done to our people, some of them are our friends. These are people that we will never see. Now, I understand you mentioned of the price and the sacrifice that some of us have to pay. How do you convince a Ugandan that, you know what, if we are going to liberate this country, you might be, you might want to pay the price, and that price may be it's going to cost your life. How do you tell them? We live in a society that have now resorted completely to food, fun, and entertainment. Mohanji comedy store fills to capacity. All shows in Uganda, I watch them, they fill to capacity because instead of standing up, they're afraid. So now they've instead decided, let's dance, let's eat, let's enjoy and ignore, because if we raise our voice, we're going to be killed. How do we inspire? How do we restore hope and inspire or restore courage amongst our people, more especially the young people in our country?
What eludes many people, it seems, is the lack of understanding that words are a weapon. Speaking is a weapon. And all people on all sides who know that it is a weapon can put it to good use. All autocratic regimes, that's why they try to muzzle information. That's why they try to muzzle voices, because they know the power of speaking. So when people become accomplices and they keep quiet, basically they'll be playing in the hands of those who want to ensure that hope is not built. Because those who disempower people, those who undermine hope, amongst the weapons they use is speaking, propaganda, to craft messages in such a way for people to believe that there's no hope. There's nothing you can do, simply chill and let them do whatever they want to do. After all, change will happen at some point, wherever that will be. At least let me survive. Propaganda is used that effect. And in Uganda, of course, combined with a number of issues, the use of money has been elevated to a point where it has become, it's an idol almost now to worship in this country, and the sense of instant gratification, which unfortunately influences the mind of those who are educated, a significant portion of us. are really hampered by progressing in our lives, in becoming who God created us to be a proud people, to be a confident people, to be a people who have a sense of self-worth. But because we are so trapped in that emotion of instant gratification, we abandon the other issues. Even if you feel unworthy, even if you lack confidence, it doesn't matter, as long as you get money or you find yourself in a position. So it's a tough thing, it's a psychological thing. And the only way you can turn around people to stand and say, even if it means death, I will die, but I'll die in dignity. You cannot achieve that in no other way but through speaking and example. And it is as old as history. And there's evidence that it works. Because if it didn't work, then we would still be in either Stone Age or in the medieval times. But as society keeps on progressing, keeps on evolving, is that because at every point in history, there are people who are always ready to stand up. If it means paying a price, they paid. And therefore, they create courage in others. Because really what is required now is moral courage. This is nothing else. So we can't stop speaking. We have to keep speaking every time everybody who can speak gets a chance. We have to keep speaking. We have seen regimes come down because of speaking. You may agree with the Iranians or you may not agree with them, whatever their political stance is. The current dispensation in Iran, when they overthrew the Shah of Iran in the 70s, Ayatollah was in Paris. He wasn't even in Iran, and he was speaking on radio over and over until people overthrew the dictatorship of the Shah. You know, so speaking is a weapon, and we have to keep at it. Because what the other side wants to do, they want to create an environment where everybody gives up. And to some extent, they may achieve that temporarily, but those who want to change the environment, political environment in this country, must know that we are speaking and giving hope all the time. Two, confident that change happens. It's a natural law, it's a spiritual law. Change happens. But when change happens, my hope is that we will influence it in a particular direction where we desire to go. So don't just say, wait for change to happen, any kind of change. I think that's why they have pushed people to go and say, okay, change will happen. So they sit back. But you can have change at the top and the environment remains the same. We've gone through that 60 years. So do we want to spend another maybe 10 or 20? I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. And at least for us, at least for me as an individual level, I do whatever much I can do, whatever little I can do, whenever there's an opportunity to do it. And as far as we are concerned as a party, we keep doing several things. One, keep raising the voice, the consciousness of the country to say we need a value-driven nature of politics. That's why we are building a value-driven organization. And we keep on taking whatever chance we can to build hope in a situation where there is hopelessness, to shed light where there is darkness. Because unlike other people who think that it can't work, we believe it can work. And we believe that by God's grace, it will work. Because we have seen other situations that have seemed hopeless. Because at least we have had the advantage of going to school. We can read history all over the globe. And we have seen people who have, liberated themselves from, situations which seemed as hopeless as ours. Some of them worse off than ours. But they keep organizing. They keep struggling until they set themselves free. We are not different. So we'll stick it out and we'll do everything humanly possible until change happens. And we believe that it needs to be change that is influenced in a positive direction. We're not people which can just simply give up and say, let's wait until something happens. We don't operate like that.
The end, but before I bring in Remy, I just wanted to add just a simple question on that one. You said we have to keep speaking. Now, I'll read a few lines here. And I'm reading from the words of Noam Chomsky, one of my favorite guys in the USA politics. He says, the media serve and propagandize on behalf of the powerful societal interests that control and finance them. The representatives of these interests have important agendas and principles that they want to advance, and they're all well positioned to shape and constrain media policy. Now, in a country like ours, the media is by and large controlled by the Museveni and his establishment, the movement establishment. Now, space has been, the space where we have to raise our voices from has been taken over. I'm quite certain that you are a victim of, the controlling of the media in our country. So do we invent our own platforms where we speak from, or we continue pushing so that we are given space on these media spaces that by and large are dominated and controlled by Mr. Museveni and the movement?
We do two things: create alternative platforms. But the most critical thing, work on changing the reality on the ground. Because what is happening in Uganda is happening everywhere else. Let me use again the example of the war between Russia and Ukraine. It doesn't matter which side one supports. But there have been so much propaganda, and at times you know to know. So if you are someone who wants to know the truth, you must look for alternative platforms. Listen to the official versions, listen to Russia, listen to Europe and America. Also listen on the other alternative platforms where there are people speaking. And then you can make your own judgment. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what Russia is saying, doesn't matter what Ukraine is saying, Europe, America, whatever is saying. Eventually, what happens on the ground is going to determine the narrative. Because when the war started, you hear one side, which is influencing opinion to believe that Russia is going to win. Then you have others who are saying Ukraine is going to win. So you have to listen to all, make your own judgment, but eventually the one who wins, that becomes an established fact, and it doesn't matter. You cannot manipulate it. If Ukraine went and retook, for example, all the lost territories, including Crimea, I mean, there's nothing Russia would do about that, because journalists would go there and see Crimea under the Ukrainians. If the Russians were to take all these eastern parts of Ukraine along, is it the river? I don't remember. Is it the Dnieper River, which I don't remember the name exactly, and places like Odessa. And eventually, maybe they got into a ceasefire and negotiated into a settlement, and they retained areas like that. That would be a new reality. And there is no journalist, there is no government that would manipulate that. So people can spin things when they are not crystal clear. Here we have to fight until we take power. The moment that happens, and what unfolds, hopefully, because my hope is that it's just not the take of power. My hope is that those who take power are also of a mind and nature that can act in building a better society. That becomes self-evident. If it does not become self-evident, there is no way you can manipulate that. So to me, the focus as we listen on the different platforms like we are trying to do, we have to work 24/7 to change the undesirable reality which is here in Uganda and change it into the desirable reality that we want. And I can tell you, all these people you see on propaganda, that's why I never follow propagandists. They can say whatever they want to say. They can, all nature of propaganda, they can spew it out 24/7. But when the reality changes, that's it. And so many of them will now look for a new thing to propagandize about. You have to spend more time on that, change the reality. And then the person running propaganda will have no way of spinning. I mean, it's like, I don't know what example one can use. Remmy, I know the culture of our country, politics seems to rotate around individuals more or less. Is one thing that we find a lot of, we work day and night to change that. And that's why we are building Alliance for National Transformation, to reach a point where when people look at us, can start making a conclusion that that's a credible alternative political force. It can take power, it can manage this country. Does that mean that we shouldn't talk about individuals? We should talk about individuals. I have no problem with that. I have always had the desire to lead this country. One, I believe I have the capability. Two, I believe that there's nothing which can't be changed in this country. But you see, I spend more time focusing on what would enable an individual, whether it would be me or someone else, to enable them to undertake the challenge that we face as a country, but at the same time be able to transform the country. If I was to focus on myself, I would be marketing myself. Ever since I became joined the FDC in 2004, I always tell people, I know which buttons you can push in this country and really you become popular. I know. I have got certain skills which I could apply to become, to some extent or to a large extent, popular. But the question always at the back of my mind, however good any individual is, any of us, by any method you get into power, but you have not built the necessary infrastructure to enable you to do the things that you desire to do, like in this case, what we desire to do as an organization. How will one human being change a country that is in such a mess? That's why we concentrate on building teams. So when you are building teams, you have to be very careful in what comes first. Projecting an individual, Remmy must also recognize that there's a significant number of people who are tired of 60 years building around individuals. So if that individual, however good he or she is, God calls him or her, then what happens? That everything now comes to an end. That's why the good that is in us, for those of us who are in NT, there's good in me, there's good in a number of other leaders. We want to bring it together and build a team and also build a new culture. And when we reach a point, a turning point, if by God's grace, I am the one leading and we take power, then we transform the country. But if anything was to happen to me, God forbid, or any of the other leaders that could become a leader, that we simply don't collapse and say, this is the end. We have 46 million people. We're not trying to build a foundation, the best of which 100 million people can be, led in a manner where they can eat, where they can have good health, where they can have good education, where they can exercise their potential to the utmost that they can. That can't take one individual. That must be teamwork. Individuals are necessary. Yes. That's why I spend all the time I spend in trying to build an institution. I could have spent it trying to do possibly what many other people would desire that we do as individuals. But from a understanding of what the challenges are in this country, I spend more time trying to build an institution. And if it's God's will, we will succeed in doing that. And again, if by God's grace we take power, then people, by benefit of hindsight, will look back and understand what I'm trying to talk about. Because right now, many people may not understand me, much as they didn't understand me when I was in FDC. I know. Remmy, we keep building. Because I could go on giving the explanations and many people would think that what else would I say? So we keep building. We are so convinced about what we are doing. There are challenges along the, some I can speak about, for example, resources. Resources are highly needed. That's maybe a subject which my hope I keep asking people to bring it out so that it doesn't come from our mouth as politicians. We have asked the religious leaders, we have asked cultural leaders, we have asked civil society and all Ugandans to ensure that if they want to see this country prosper, that they must invest in the political processes. You know, so that when I speak and say we need money, they don't say, okay, those are politicians. What else would they say? But they want to see an independent country. You know, there's no, even if money comes from wherever it comes from, there is a saying, an English saying that whoever pays the piper calls the tune. And we will keep at that. We will keep at that. We are not going to give up. We will not allow any challenge to forestall our continued effort to reach a point of breakthrough. That will happen at some point. When, I don't know. We keep on trying to mobilize resources. Every amount of resource that we get, we'll keep it put it into what we believe in until it becomes self-evident. So in the meantime, we will be challenged, we'll be held to account. And it is, you are correct, Remmy, you are a journalist, you need to ask these questions. The questions I cannot answer to the satisfaction of the people who listen because they haven't seen what we always talk about. My hope is that it will reach a time when what we envision in our minds, what we work for 24/7, day and night, tirelessly, that there is a time when it will become self-evident. And when that time comes, then that's when people will understand us. It takes money to build organizations. That's one of the biggest impediments. We could have taken about 10 seats, but that's a totally different story. I mean, there are many stories in this country. There are some we just talk about. There are some we ignore, you know, because it's even a distraction. Because you see, the one thing in life I've also learned as an individual, and I try to apply it even in the organizational aspects, you have to resist by the nature of the challenges you meet to get sucked into a mindset of complaining and blaming. It's a killer. When you are a leader and you are at the level at the level at which we are trying to lead, if you are trying to lead a country, if you allow yourself to degenerate to the point where you become frustrated, you start complaining, you start blame games, you are not going to be effective in whatever you're trying to do. Because wars, political, military, economic, are won or lost at the level of the mind. I know that for sure. And I try to practice what I know. So there are times we know about things and we don't want to engage so much in them because eventually they can become like their complaints. You can also degenerate and you make them complaints. So we leave them aside and we keep focused on the things we intend to do. And when we neutralize the arrogance that is in the politics of this country, at the point when it is fully neutralized and we're all equal before the law, then it can be a subject of those who write history. But we would have done our part. Yes, please. Great. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. We'll work on that. Our technical people are listening in. We've been working on that, but it also requires money anyway to sort out some of those things. Yeah, please go ahead. It'll be my pleasure. If he is not able to speak, maybe he can text it and you read it. Ask him to text the question if he is not able to speak for technical reasons. Yeah, someone is coming through. I think he was making comments. Yeah. Anyway, extraordinary circumstances call for extraordinary actions. That's why, I mean, like now I served in the army. I don't think that if we're in a normal situation, political situation, I don't think there would be any way how I would have ended up in the army. So I suppose that's also in regard to other people. For example, like now, the issue of journalists. If the situation was normal, I suppose most journalists would be as neutral as would be required. But when you see someone putting a boot on someone's neck, and you're a journalist, you will wonder how to write about that. So it's tough. It's tough. It's a tough thing. I hear in Uganda it's tough for everybody. It's not only journalists, it's for everybody. Everybody, you know. Like for example, when the religious leaders come up and speak of things which are critical about the regime, then people will go for them. But when they praise the regime, then it is like they have ceased to be religious leaders and also cultural leaders like that. That's the environment. But my hope is that we will soon see the end of that, and then we can have a normal society, and then people can exercise their talents where they are called to serve, and it will be normal for everybody. But we're in an abnormal situation right now, so it's quite complex for people who operate in the different spaces where they find themselves. Now, as we end, first, let me thank you, Mordecai and Remmy, for hosting me today. And thank all the people who are on the different platforms and ask that we should not give up hope. It doesn't matter whether you are someone who supports the regime or someone against the regime. There are things which must be common to all of us to ensure that they are transparent systems of managing national resources, that there is equality before the law, that there is fairness, that there are equal opportunities. These should be things that we all fight for across the political divide. And we respect those who, to some extent, or to whatever extent they're able to, who keep raising their voices even when it is difficult for them to do so, like those who are on the side of the regime. That's how we'll keep on building until we reach a critical number of Ugandans who can shift the balance of forces in favor of change and hopefully positive change. That's what we work for as Alliance for National Transformation. We keep doing that because while we are projecting long, medium term, we also act on the day-to-day requirements or responsibilities or the burdens that we carry as leaders, as an organization, to see how we can influence this situation. So we call out all like-minded Ugandans who want to see a value-driven organization to link up with us. There are those who can be active. There are those who may not necessarily be active, but give background support in terms of maybe influencing, participating in policy formulation in areas where we link up with them in regard to that. Others, financing, so we can build a normal society as we progress towards the future. Most of the young, the future can't shape itself. It must be purposefully shaped in the direction that we desire to see the country go. So I'd like to thank you, and may God richly bless you all.